Hello and welcome back to another research recap. My name is Lisa. I'm your host. I'm the owner and head coach at Nutrition Coaching and Life, where we help people lose body fat, increase muscle mass, and improve their body composition in relationship with food. Once a week or once in a while, I like to jump on here to talk about some of the more recent research or discuss a research review, and that is the case today. I want to talk about an article in Body by Science, my favorite research review, which is by Bill Campbell. And in this issue, this is actually from the December issue, we are talking about artificial sweeteners. Do artificial sweeteners make it easier or more difficult to lose weight? The actual title of the study was Sucrose compared with artificial sweeteners, different effects on ad libitum food intake and body weight after 10 weeks of supplementation in overweight subjects. And the study was done by Raben et al. It's actually taken from 2002, excuse me. But in the introduction, Bill explains why he wanted to discuss a slightly older research or study and why it's still very relevant today. I think it's such an interesting topic. You hear a lot of things about artificial sweeteners. People are either very much, pro, no problem at all. I have a Diet Coke once a day. And other people are like, oh, no type of artificial sweetener, actually not even stevia or monk fruit sweetener and so on. So I'm excited to dive into it. Before I do though, I just want to remind you, in case you're listening to this before tomorrow, before the new year, we are starting our 2025 with a 7-day Kickstarter called Drop the Stress, Drop the Pounds. So by focusing on 7 wonderful stress management habits and just reducing overall Christmas stress, life stress, and so on, we want to help you lose the weight that you're trying to get rid of or that you've been struggling to get rid of because of your high stress load. If you're interested in this 7-day Kickstarter, also if you don't particularly feel like you're super stressed out, this challenge might be for you, or it's not a challenge, but this Kickstarter might be for you. But if you're interested, either head over to my Instagram for more information, or just simply click the link in the description to read about it, read about the 7 habits that we're going to focus on, and to see if that might be a great way to kick off 2025 for you. I personally am really excited for it. I'm also just generally excited for the new year. There is something about fresh beginnings, which is wonderful. Of course, New Year's resolutions I do think are overrated, but nothing wrong with setting goals, with having high aspirations and dreams for a new year. So anyway, let's get into whether artificial sweeteners make it harder or easier to lose weight. Giving you some background information here. So the World Health Organization advises not to use non-sugar sweeteners for weight control in a newly released guideline. That was the headline that was all over the news last year. One of the criticisms of this position taken by the World Health Organization, is that their conclusions are based on observational studies, which have a lot of confounding variables. Just this year, early reports of a large study reported that swapping sugar-sweetened foods and beverages with low or no calorie sweeteners could aid in weight management following rapid weight loss in adults. So the newest research was conducted by researchers from the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom, and the leading research laboratory that studies appetite and obesity. If you've been in health and fitness for a while or a short time, you know how controversial the topic of artificial sweeteners is. Some would say you should never consume artificial sweeteners, and others say there's absolutely nothing wrong with them, and we should not stress over them. I will actually talk about my personal stance at the end of this, but before I do, I want to go through the research review. I understand that many of the arguments and debates are more broadly focused on overall health and not just on weight management. However, we must recognize that excess body fat causes many adverse health effects. If we can either lose excess body fat or prevent it from accumulating in the first place, we are addressing a very important health outcome. When I first sat down to summarize a more recent study on artificial sweeteners and their effects on body weight, this is Bill speaking, realized that this more recent study was less impactful than older than the older landmark study that we're reviewing here. Because of that, he decided to include that in this month's issue. The goal was not to always bring you the most recent studies on a particular topic, but to bring out the best research, even if it's slightly older, that deserves your attention, and that should guide our thinking as we formulate our opinions and best practices for the clients that we serve. I do want to say, once again, this is my favorite research review, Body by Science, but there are other great research reviews out there, such as Reps by Elaine Norton, such as the Ellen Aragon Research Review, and so on. Mass is another great one. But yeah, this one comes out once a month. It reviews 2 research articles. I think the review is like $7.99 per month. I have no affiliation with it. I just really, really love Bill's way of working, and therefore I recommend it. But anyway, continuing on, when the study was published in 2002, there was no consensus on the usefulness of substituting artificial sweeteners for sucralose, also known sucrose, not sucralose, excuse me, also known as table sugar and comprised of glucose and fructose. This may seem a little silly today, as we know that if we replace calorie-laden excess sugars with 0-calorie artificial sweeteners, improvements or decreases in body fat can be predicted. This is in alignment with the energy balance model of obesity. This study was one of the major publications that started to shift the paradigm on artificial sweeteners and how their use could be helpful in the fight against obesity. Prior to the study, almost all the research on artificial sweeteners was short-term studies lasting from a few hours to 1 to 2 days. For body weight regulation, short-term studies are not useful because body composition changes, particularly body fat losses, are not able to be detected in a day or 2. Instead, need a few weeks of an intervention to be able to detect changes. So the study we're going to review was very well designed. It was a 10-week long study, which is plenty of time to determine if changes in body fat occur. And one of the best features of the study was that the subject's diet was actually not controlled. So outside of the sucrose or artificial sweetener intake. So that's why it's titled at Libitum, so they were free to eat whatever otherwise. This allowed the researchers to expand their research outcomes beyond body composition changes and investigate if high levels of artificial sweetener intake could cause or caused increases in appetite and calorie macronutrient intakes. So who was in the study? We have 41 overweight adults, 35 females and 6 males between the ages of 20 and 50, so a nice range here. The average age was therefore 35. To be eligible for the study, subjects had to be overweight, defined as having a BMI between 25 and 30, not dieting, not pregnant, or lactating. At baseline, the average body composition values for the subjects were as follows. The body weight was on average 81 kilos or 178 pounds. The BMI was an average of 28 and body fat percentage 35. This was a parallel design study in which one group of subjects received supplemental drinks and foods containing sucrose, so sugar, the sugar group, while the other group received similar beverages and food containing artificial sweeteners, the artificial sweetener group. Subjects were not informed about the study's true purpose. That is called an incomplete disclosure. This was done so that the subjects did not try to guess if they were consuming sucrose or artificially sweetened foods and beverages. If the subjects knew what the purpose of the study was and could figure out if they were getting real sugar or artificially sweetened food and drinks, it could have biased the study's results. The researchers went one step further and told all the subjects that they were receiving supplements containing artificial sweeteners. Some researchers employ this form of deception to reduce participant bias. Participant bias is a tendency of participants or subjects in an experiment to consciously or subconsciously act in a way that they think the experiment or researcher wants them to act. So, if you were told that you didn't receive, you were in a sugar group or so, you might then later cut your calories, or the other group, if they realize there's a study on artificial sweeteners, would be like, okay, this is about weight loss, I should probably eat less, or something like that. Anyway, so here is a short explanation on that as well. Oh no, sorry, didn't include that. But the deception and incomplete disclosure in research, the use of this is valuable because to answer scientific inquiries in human research. Deception occurs when participants are intentionally given false information about some aspect of the study. In this case, the researchers told the subjects that everyone received artificially sweetened foods and beverages, which was false. Incomplete disclosure occurs when the investigator withholds information about the purpose of the research and or procedures employed in the study. The researchers did not inform the subjects that the primary purpose of the study was about consuming artificial sweeteners or real sugar to determine the effects on body composition and food intake. So now let's look. We had the two groups as mentioned. So a 10-week intervention, we have the sugar group, which received a supplement containing sucrose. And we have the artificial sweetener group, which received a supplement containing artificial sweeteners. So here are the details of the intervention. The amount of sucrose given to the subjects in the sugar group was based on the goal of providing them with 2 grams of sucrose per kilogram body weight, so about 0.9 grams of sucrose per pound of body weight. For a 175-pound person, this would have been an intake of 160 grams of sucrose every day for 10 weeks. That's a high dose of sucrose every day. In terms of a percentage of total calories, a subject of this size consuming about 2,800 calories would correspond to 23% of all calories coming from sucrose. The artificial sweetener group received an equivalent amount by weight of drinks and foods, resulting in an average intake of artificial sweeteners of approximately 0.6 grams per day. The percentage contribution of the different artificial sweeteners were 54% aspartame, 22% acesulfame K, 23% cyclamate, and 1% saccharin. The researchers noted that the average daily intake of the different sweeteners in the artificial sweetener group were far below the acceptable daily intakes. Excuse me. The subjects were instructed to consume a specific minimum amount of sucrose-sweetened and artificially sweetened drinks and food during the 10-week intervention period. In the sugar group, 70% of the sucrose came from drinks and 30% came from solid foods. The researchers indicated that great efforts were made before the intervention to find the most palatable artificially sweetened food products on the market for which a matching sucrose-containing product existed. The types of food provided to the subjects in beverages and foods were as follows. And you've got that here on the right of that slide here as well. So beverages was mostly soft drinks, for example, Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, etc., flavored fruit juices, orange, raspberry, sport, and mixed drinks. The caps and labels from all those soft drinks were removed to help hide the sugar versus artificially sweetened beverages from being identified by the subjects. And then when it comes to the solid foods, that was yogurt, so for example, strawberry, peach, cherry from the sucrose group, or strawberry, rhubarb, peach, melba, and forest berries for the sweetener group. Marmalade, ice cream, and stewed fruits. The subjects were forced, more or less, to consume the amount of sucrose described above if they were in the sugar group. Just like the subjects in the artificial sweetener group were forced to consume beverages and foods that were artificially sweetened if they were in this group. As you can imagine, it can be very difficult to match the calorie intake of provided foods when one group is given calorie-containing foods and beverages, the sugar group, while the other group is given 0 calories, sweetened beverages and foods, the artificial sweetener group. While this is true for the carbohydrate intake of the two groups, The sugar group was given more calories from carbs than the artificial sweetener group. Efforts were made to control for the differences in dietary fats in the foods that were provided to the subjects, and told they must consume. So to keep the fat intake from the provided foods as similar as possible for the two groups, subjects in the artificial sweetener group were given additional butter or corn oil every week. This was because some of the artificially sweetened products were fat reduced. While the subjects were given either sucrose sweetened or artificially sweetened foods and beverages to consume each day during the study, these provided foods were only a fraction of the total daily calories of the subject that the subjects were consuming. Therefore, subjects were free to consume their typical diet ad libitum until they felt pleasantly satisfied. To monitor any changes in food intake, subjects completed comprehensive dietary records at the beginning, mid, and end of the study. The subjects were given instructional materials and educated on using food scales to complete their 7-day dietary records. When it comes to the exercise, there was no exercise intervention for this study. They were not given a workout routine. However, the researchers did have the subjects record how much exercise in hours activity per week and the intensity of any exercise completed to make sure there weren't any changes in physical activity habits during the study to confirm that there were no differences between the two groups. What physique-related outcome variables were measured? So again, the primary outcome of this study was body composition. So body composition was assessed at the beginning and at the end of the 10-week intervention by DEXA. In addition to body weight data, the researchers evaluated some health markers and subjective appetite sensation questionnaires. The additional assessment included a subjective appetite sensations questionnaire. So that included hunger, fullness, palatability of the foods, and health markers such as systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure. What were the results? We are asking once again. So the primary purpose of the study was to determine if supplementing the diet with additional calories from sucrose or zero-calorie artificial sweeteners would have any effect on body composition, blood pressure, or subjective appetite sensation. Now, when it comes to the nutritional intake, not surprisingly, there was a significant difference in total calorie intake between the two groups, with the sugar group consuming more calories than the artificial sweetener group, logically. The sugar group increased their calorie intake by 480 calories from 2,270 to 2,750. In contrast, the artificial sweetener group slightly decreased their average daily calories by about 100. Remember that the sugar group was given extra sugar, which is a calorie-containing nutrient, obviously, to consume each day, while the artificial sweetener group was given additional foods and beverages as well. Their foods and beverages were artificially sweetened and therefore contained fewer calories from carbohydrates as compared to the sugar group. The table that we're going to see in the next slide here, sorry, I skipped that here on the left bottom. The table summarizes the additional calorie intake supplied by sucrose and artificially sweetened foods and beverages. The two groups had a difference of about 580 calories per day. The 580 calorie difference was nearly 100% attributed to the additional carbohydrate or sucrose that the sugar group consumed. So going back to the previous slide here with the body composition, the sugar group gained 3.5 pounds of body weight, while the sweetener group lost 2.2 pounds during the 10-week intervention. Regarding body composition, the sugar group gained about 3 pounds of body fat and 0.5 pound of lean mass. As a percentage of the weight they gained, 80% was in the form of fat mass. The sweetener group lost about 0.7 pounds of body weight and 1.5 pounds of lean mass. For the sweetener group, about 70% of the weight loss came from lean body mass and 30% from body fat. The loss of lean mass in this group isn't surprising, as non-resistance training people lose some of their body weight as lean muscle, but we typically only see about 25% of lean masses loss with weight loss. So losing more lean mass than fat mass is a little bit surprising, but it's possible that body weight losses could have accounted for a greater than normal amount of lean mass losses in this study. Unfortunately, the researchers did not measure total body water, so we can only hypothesize. So again, here on the right side, you can see just the percentage of what was lost, essentially. Now, the subjective appetite sensation questionnaire, the two groups had no significant differences in their range of hunger, fullness, and palatability of the food that they were instructed to consume, which, I mean, that's like amazing if you think about the calorie difference, and still the satiation was about the same. That means that the artificially sweetened foods were well tolerated by the subjects and had no adverse effects on the appetite measures used in the study. Looking at the health markers, after 10 weeks of adding the foods to the diet, systolic and diastolic blood pressure increased in the sugar group and decreased in the sweetener group. The differences in blood pressure between the two groups were statistically significant. Specifically, the sugar group increased systolic and diastolic blood pressure by about 4 millimole per hertz, I believe that's always called. In contrast, in the sweetener group, systolic blood pressure decreased by 3, and the diastolic blood pressure by about 1. What caused the increase in blood pressure in the sugar group was the additional was that the additional sugar in the diet? Possibly, but we also have to consider that by adding the extra calories, they gained 3 pounds of body fat. We know from previous research that excess body fat is directly associated with increases in blood pressure. The rise in blood pressure was likely due to the increased body weight in the sugar group and not like the sugar directly. Since the sweetener group lost a little bit of body weight, it's not surprising that their blood pressure decreased to some extent. So now let's look at Bill's interpretation of the data. There are two ways to look at this data. One way is to look at it from the perspective of what would happen to someone if they consumed an extra 145 grams of sugar each day. What would happen is not surprising at all. They would gain body fat. The other way to look at the study would be to look at it and say, what would happen if you replaced a lot of one's sugar-filled foods and beverages with sugar-free, low-sugar, artificially sweetened foods and beverages? Based on the research of the study, it can be hypothesized that replacing calorie-containing foods and beverages in the diet with artificially sweetened food and beverages will result in a loss of body weight and will improve blood pressure. In addition, this dietary exchange, reducing sugar in the diet and replacing it with lower sugar, or sugar-free artificially sweetened alternatives, will also have no effect on feeling of hunger, fullness, or food palatability, which, yeah, to me is the most mind-blowing thing, really, or like what stands out the most, because of course hunger, or how we perceive the foods that we eat to be and how satiated we are, plays such a big role when it comes to diet adherence. Here are a few of the statements made by the authors of the study. I had that here on the right. Interestingly, we found that energy intake, body weight, fat mass, and blood pressure increased after 10 weeks of supplementation with sucrose, whereas a decrease or no change in these variables was seen with supplementation with artificial sweeteners. These findings were not expected on the basis of previous intervention and observational studies. Therefore, overweight individuals may want to consider choosing beverages containing artificial sweeteners rather than sucrose to prevent weight gain. Now, looking at a few of the strengths and limitations of the study. So study strengths were that food and beverages selected for sugar versus for the two groups. So before the intervention, the researchers made great effort to find the most palatable artificially sweetened foods for which a matching sucrose containing product existed. So not just like something where you can directly taste that it's a quote unquote diet food. As you can imagine, not many foods and beverages can contain artificial sweeteners that would have a similar taste as sugar foods and beverages. I'll tell you one beverage that has hit a home run in this regard. Diet Dr. Pepper apparently tastes like the real thing. At least that's what Bill's saying. Then looking at the calories, so that is listed as or total calories of the two combined groups was not controlled, and he's listing that as a strength. So he's listing it as a strength because it allows insight into how much people can control total calorie intakes throughout the day when they're consuming high sugar foods and beverages, or low sugar artificially sweetened foods and drinks. In the study, we learned that subjects who consumed high sugar foods and beverage supplements didn't adjust their calorie intake at other times during the day to offset increases in body weight. We would not have been able to conclude this if the researchers had decided to control total calorie intake in this study. A few limitations here as well. So again, no body water assessment was taken, so that's kind of not given us the full picture when it comes to why or what type of lean mass was lost. And I guess you could also list the fact that they didn't control the calories as a limitation. So the decision not to control total calorie intake leaves us with some unanswered questions. For example, when calories are controlled, do high intakes of artificial sweeteners cause weight gain through some unknown mechanism of action? Unfortunately, we cannot answer this question based on how this study was designed. It's difficult to determine how much weight gain was avoided in the artificial sweetener group. Was it because of the presence of artificial sweeteners in their diet, or because this group consumed fewer calories during the study? It was likely the lower amount of calories from what we know. But anyways, thank you so much for staying tuned in up until now. I hope you still find it interesting. But he's posing the question overall: what are your thoughts on sugar consumption and the use of artificial sweeteners for a client who wants to lose body fat, or even for yourself? So I personally do enjoy some foods and beverages that contain artificial sweeteners. I have found with my clients that it comes down to a lot of personal preference. First of all, when it comes to how your body responds and how your body responds to which artificial sweeteners. So I have some clients that really don't respond too well to sucralose or to aspartame. They don't like it for the taste, or it makes them feel bloated even in small quantities. But they're absolutely fine with any others, and specifically with natural no calorie or low calorie sweeteners like stevia or like monk fruit. I have also found that it very much depends on the quantity. I've shared before that every now and then I give into my weakness of drinking like a whole 2-liter bottle of Sprite, for example. Like, especially if I'm traveling, I feel like I want to stay hydrated, but just drinking water sometimes a little bit like I just don't feel like it, and I want something fizzy to wake me up, or if it's a hot day or something like that. So anyway, that's one of my weaknesses, and when I do, I truly enjoy it in the moment, but I regret it afterwards because I feel so bloated. So it does often come down to the quantity. I'm totally fine with like a smaller quantity, like let's say like a can of Diet Sprite or Sprite Zero or whatever it's called, but just not that amount. So that's my take on it. I personally do think that it can give a little bit of, or a lot of quality of life when we're talking about being in a diet. So even just from the point of getting all your protein in with just whole foods without anything that contains artificially sweetened artificial sweeteners, I think can be quite tricky. Let's look at protein bars, protein powders. Most protein powders, unless you choose a bland or taste flavor free whatever one, do have some kind of sweetener in them. Nowadays you can easily also find some with stevia or monk fruit sweetener, but 20 years ago when this study was done, that was probably not the case. So I find prioritizing what calories you can stick with, what protein you can get, or hitting your protein and making sure you're not ruining your gut in the process. I think if we're looking at those three things and artificial sweeteners help you or allow you to do that, then by all means I don't want to say I advocate for, but I almost encourage my clients to utilize that as a great method to keep their hunger at bay while staying within their calorie window, while allowing for certain things. Like you can even make, a brownie with some artificial sweeteners, or a protein bar if you're like craving chocolate and you're in the middle of a dieting phase and you still fall short on your protein. Eating a protein bar can feel like an equivalent of having some regular chocolate or so, which would not help you get towards your protein goal. So I think as long as your gut can tolerate it, and as long as you enjoy it and you don't want to make room for the extra sugar in your diet, because I do think, while I don't necessarily set like a sugar target with my clients, I think keeping added refined sugars to a minimum is helpful just because they're not satiating. It really is kind of like when you're drinking Coca-Cola or whatever, it's not going to satiate you at all, and that's several hundred calories that you could be eating that could fill you up a lot more, or even from if it came from fruit. And here also we're talking, whole fruit being more satiating than juices, and so that's my stance. If you have any personal opinion on this, I would love to hear it. Please share it in the comments below. If you have any personal experience with it as well, with regards to how it has or hasn't affected your dieting, your gut health, I would absolutely love to hear. Please comment below. I hope you enjoyed this research review. I hope to bring more, at least 2 per month, to you in the coming year as well. I truly appreciate anybody who is following along here. Thank you so much for being part of nutrition coaching and life in this channel over the course of 2024, and I wish you nothing but the very, very best for the coming year.